Well, I'll start off just telling you a little bit about myself. I'm from Jacksonville. I was born and raised in Jacksonville. Went to Salem Lutheran School, Turner Junior High, and Jacksonville High School, and I eventually went off to Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, where I met my wife. I have a wife and two kids, a little boy Lennox and a little boy Pax, 5 and 2. When we have a family business in road construction, I'm sure you've read about it elsewhere, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later. And my dad told me, I will not hire you out of high school. I will not hire you out of college. Go do something, and if you want to come back to the business, we'll talk about it later. And that was the best thing that he could have done for me. So when I was in college, I did an internship with Congressman Ray LaHood. So I kind of got the interest in policy, and it was out in Washington, D.C., so I was on the policy side. Very, very interesting experience. I decided after college, this is the experience that I'm going to do. So after college, I moved out to Washington, D.C. I wanted to work for somebody from Illinois. And so when I first moved out there, I didn't have a job, needed to pay my rent, so I worked as a night manager at a video store for a while, which being from small town Jacksonville, it's interesting when the first thing they tell you is, if somebody tries to steal a DVD, let them. So I was the small town kid walking down the street holding my wallet because I thought everyone was going to, take my money. But, you get used to it and you realize that that's not the reality. So after working there, I got a job as a night manager at a high-rise apartment building. And it was kind of a good experience because when people would come home from work, everything was my fault. If their toilet wasn't flushing, it was my fault. If they didn't have hot water or their heat wasn't working, it was my fault. So you kind of see how people treat other people, and it was a good experience to learn how to treat each person. After that, I worked for Congressman Shimkus for about 2.5 years. Great experience, great office. It was a very, we were like a family. I mean, everybody pitched in to do whatever, whether it was folding letters or whatever it may be. First time I met Congressman Shimkus, he asked me if I had political aspirations, and I said no way, because who in their right mind would want to go into a business where you get drugged through the mud and lies made up about you and things of that sort. But he said, and it stuck with me, he said, we need good people to get involved. He said, whether it's running for political office or whether it's just being involved in your community, we need good people to be involved. And that stuck with me. So when I moved back to Jacksonville and got involved in IRC, I also went to the mayor and I said, I'd like to get involved in the community. How can I do that? And there was an opening on the library board, so I served on the library board for a short term and eventually became an alderman on the Jacksonville City Council, was appointed to fill an opening. I ran for election for that and won, served just about 5 years on the Jacksonville City Council. Chair of the Public Protection Committee. In the last couple of years, I was chair of the Finance Committee. All the while serving at IRC in operations and management. I think that going to Springfield was never really on my radar. I mean, I was always in touch. I talked to Jim Watson, my predecessor, a decent amount. And I used to go in and say, hey, why don't you go in there? Why don't you just do this? Or why don't you just do that? And then you get to Springfield and you realize, oh, aha, this is why he couldn't just walk in and fix these issues. The reason that I'm here, the reason that I'm running is I do have 2 little boys, and if I want them to be close to mom and dad in the future, something has to change. I don't want to tell my kids that they have to live somewhere else. I don't want them to be saddled with the debt that we have here in this state. So there's nothing that really gives me any huge personal incentive to do this, other than preparing our state for hopefully a growing population and not a fleeing population.
So how do you accomplish that?
Well, you know, the reality is I've served in a super minority. And the only way to get something done is to work across the aisle, and I've done that. I mean, I talk to people across the aisle on a regular basis. It's unfortunately in Springfield, it's such a political arena more so than a policy arena, that trust is the biggest issue. Trust is the biggest issue that we have in Springfield. You don't know who you can trust. I think that I've worked with a number of individuals on the other side of the aisle that have given me their trust, and I have given them mine for the most part. And I think as we work on things, there's been at least a couple bills that have been held up by the majority party that I have gone to them and I've said, hey, this is a good bill, what's wrong with it? Do you want one of your members to sponsor it? I'm okay with that. If it's a good thing for the state of Illinois, I don't need credit. I've never been a limelight kind of guy. In fact, the first speech I ever gave in middle school, I ran out because I was so nervous. I'm not the type of person that needs the spotlight. I don't need the headlines. It's nice to see every now and then, as long as it's good news. But you know, that's not the type of person I am. So.
In terms of the policy issues, what are your passions policy-wise? What have you been wanting to work on?
I really think that education has to be a huge priority for the state of Illinois. I believe that in order for education to do well as far as funding goes, that we need to look at human services, which is why when I first came in, my first request for a committee was human services appropriations, to which many people said, are you crazy? And I said, apparently. It's one of the largest portions of our budget, and I think it's very important to dive right in. It includes Medicaid. It also includes the Illinois School for the Deaf and the Illinois School for the Visually Impaired, which are very important parts of my home community and the state of Illinois as well.
On education, how do you feel about the Minar bill that is pending in your chamber?
You know, I think it's a step in the right direction. I asked the senator if he was concerned that it was DOA when the speaker did not appoint House members to that original committee when it just became a Senate committee. I asked if he thought it was DOA, and he said that's no reason not to have the conversation. I agree with him. I think that we need to continue this conversation. Everybody talks about, you know, well, we can't continue to pick winners and losers and things of that sort. I think that as long as we continue additional funding on top of the equation for Chicago, we're continuing to pick winners and losers. And I think that bill still includes those choices.
Do you have any view on the extension of the tax? Because obviously in the governor's race and everywhere else it's a big issue. But,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
Quinn will say you don't have adequate education funding. Roner says we can cut that tax back and still give more to education. Who do you believe, and do you have an opinion on the extension of the tax?
I consider myself a conservative realist. I'm fiscally conservative, but I understand numbers. I mean, I've been involved in the budget of my business, obviously my personal budget, as well as, you know, the budget of the city of Jacksonville. So I understand what numbers are. I understand what they mean. So, but I also understand that until we put our foot down, we're going to continue to fund additional wasteful things like NRI, which is now going into community support line is instead of 50 million or whatever it was, it's now a $20 million line item for community support, which is basically a continuation of that same money. We're going to continue to fund new trees for one suburban district that's going to cost us $1 million. We're going to continue to fund a new school in a certain individual's district. It's not going towards education, it's going to special projects. And until we put it all back into where it needs to be, you can't just say, okay, I'm going to give you this money, because they've proven they can't spend it correctly. They've proven that they're not willing to rein in. So until we rein in, I'm not willing to say yes to additional revenue.
How about an expansion of sales tax to services? I mean, again, you just talked about like $37 million.
Yeah.
And we're talking about possibly a $4 billion.
Oh, and I completely understand. These are small examples. I get that, but you remember last year we expanded Medicaid, and they're talking about a possible increase in cost for fiscal year 15 to be anywhere from $300 to $400 million. When we get DHS and HFS, you can't get them in the room at the same time, but DHS says, oh, that's HFS, and HFS says, oh, that's DHS. You can't get what the actual cost increase is going to be. But whether it's $300 or $400 million, that's why we have to borrow from other state funds. We're borrowing $650 million from other state funds this year, which is going to put an additional pressure of probably $1.3 billion on fiscal year 16's budget. So until we put our foot down, this stuff's going to keep going.
Does that putting the foot down means letting this rate roll back? Or
it means that we need to sit down and we need to have honest conversations about what we need and what we don't need, and then we need to talk about revenue. Revenue can't be the first discussion we have. It can't. We've proven that.
In your introductory remarks, you mentioned the business, and
Yeah.
when your opponent was here, and I'm not sure how the funding is going between you two and how it's looking, because I'm thinking it's a Republican area, but I'm not positive. He talked about the conflict of interest if you're a road contractor and a state legislator. And how do you deal with that allegation? I know many people in the General Assembly have jobs on the outside, and it's supposed to be quote unquote part-time.
Yeah.
How part-time is it to you, and is there a conflict, and how do you deal with that?
So the company that I run, IRC Inc., has no state contracts. We work for counties, townships, and municipalities. The parent company is Illinois Road Contractors, which, if you go to the comptroller's website, you'll find Illinois Road Contractors on there. And the only reason that's on there is because basically Illinois Road Contractors does the accounting for SMM. SMM is a company that is owned by my dad's generation, my grandfather's generation, and a couple of guys that used to work for us. It used to be State Material Marathon. They were a jobber for Marathon. They sold fuel to farms and companies all over. When they decided to get out of that business, this group of guys got together and bought it. So I have absolutely no ownership of that. And the only reason it comes in as an Illinois Road Contractors is because that's where the money comes in. It's accounting. But I will say, if anybody in here's ever been around any type of bidding, here's the process. I get a bid document from, say, Sangamon County. Sangamon County gives me a bid document about this thick. Go through all the papers, fill it all out, get a bid bond, make sure you're a responsible bidder, all that stuff. You sign it, you put it all in an envelope, you lick it, you seal it, and you hand it in. And whoever else wants to do that, they do the same exact thing. And then at, say, 10 o'clock on Tuesday morning, it's an open meeting. The whole public is invited. Anyone can walk in, and they open the envelope all at the same time. Now, I don't know how myself or the President of the United States or the King of Siam could have any influence on a process like that. So if anyone here sees a conflict in that, I'd be happy to discuss.
By the way, IRC is what? Is that just an accounting firm, or what is it?
Illinois Road Contractors is the company. IRC Inc. is local roads. We do oil and ship.
Okay,
We
and
do
is that-
county,
that's the one-
township, and
you
rural
are-
roads.
What position are you with that?
I'm the vice president, and I schedule work.
Okay,
I mean, I'm part of the budgeting process, but I also schedule work.
so the big one is Illinois Road Contractors, and the little one is IRC.
Correct.
Okay, so it's just a different company with the
Yeah.
same letters.
Yeah.
Okay.
IRC has been in existence for almost 90 years. We used to spread oil from here to Colorado when they didn't put rock on top. People would just stay home for days. So
So with that, then, does the Illinois road contractors, do they have state contracts?
no,
Or-
Illinois Road Contractors does not have state contracts. It's actually, like I
So
said,
within the whole group, there are no state contracts through IDOT?
there would be state contracts through an asphalt stone company, which is part and separate from my portion of the business.
How did you vote on the pension reform bill? You voted no?
I voted no. Yeah,
Can you talk about that? Why did you vote no?
yeah. It's the first thing that we do is promise to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the state of Illinois. I think the language in the Constitution is very explicit. It says that it says that it shall not be diminished, and that's where I was at on that. It was a tough bill. I think that even the 3505 probably would have had trouble passing constitutional muster, because from my understanding the retired teachers were not at the table when that bill was being discussed. So there's the pension issue in this state is a very, very tough issue. It's not something you can just say, oh well, we need to do something, let's just do this. I mean, it has to be looked at in a different way because of that protection within the Constitution. Now, I understand also that protection, I consider it kind of a double-edged sword, because having that protection means that there's not necessarily an incentive to push to ensure that it's funded. There may be more incentive to say, oh well, we can skip this because we're going to get it by the teachers or the unions, to say, well, we're guaranteed to get that. We can push funding over to to education, and that's why some of these groups were okay with pension holidays and things of that sort.
So what's the next step, do you think?
I think we need to stop digging the hole. I think we need to provide options for future and current state employees. Should they so choose, I think they should be able to go into a 401k system. If you could imagine a system where, for example, my 401k that I get I get matched half up to 4%, and I think that's probably fairly standard. 4% of my wage that I put into 401k. If you could imagine the state continuing to do what we do, say whether it's 8% and the state puts in 8%, or 9% and 9%, whatever that percentage may be, and the individual actually owns that. I mean, I think a lot of people would choose that, and we could stop digging the hole. I understand that means that there will be less money going into the pension, but you would see, a decrease in liability as well.
course, there are skeptics out there who think that people would not voluntarily take a 401k if they can get a guaranteed defined benefit for life, which is what they do now with a guaranteed annual percent increase,
yeah.
which is the biggest cost driver that is going on right
And I understand that, and I think that the people that would be taking that would be individuals who may not stay with the state as a career. If they decide to move on, they could take it with them. But if they decide to stick around, it's theirs. The state cannot not pay it. The state cannot take it away. It's theirs. I think that's the biggest incentive, with what we've seen over the past couple years.
Do you favor building tiers for future employees, or different layers of gradually change the way that we deal with those benefits?
I think that can be an option. I think that can be an option for future people coming in, but I'd have to see what those tiers would look like.
What are your thoughts on term limits?
I'm okay with term limits. I think term limits are probably exactly what this state needs right now. Unfortunately, it's a double-edged sword. It's another one of those double-edged swords where if you have term limits for the people in elected office, do you have term limits also for the people working behind the scenes? Not necessarily agency staff, but the people that are working within the General Assembly. I definitely favor term limits for legislative leaders, and I also think that there should be contribution limits on legislative leaders. That was a major loophole in the quote unquote ethics reform that went through. I don't understand why the individual has contribution limits, whereas the leader can raise as much as they want, whenever they want, however they want. So there's a lot of reforms that need to be made.
Why term limits for legislative leaders? Why do you think that would be helpful?
It doesn't allow the power to consolidate in one person's hands, which is what we've seen over the years.
Transportation needs in your district. Do you have significant
Yeah.
transportation or road infrastructure?
We are the 100th district is a very transportation-rich district. We've got rail, river, highway infrastructure. We need to work on Corridor 67, which will open up opportunity for the entire west side of the state of Illinois, from distribution centers to whatever it may be. I believe that we are losing opportunities to the state of Missouri because we do not have that transportation option.
How close is that to completion?
It's pretty far off. Yeah, it's pretty far off. There's a section they're working on right now just north of Jacksonville, but you go south from almost to Root House, from Root House south to just south of Jerseyville. There's nothing completed there, and there's still missing sections up north as well.
Where, like, Alton to Peoria?
Basically, yeah, basically, yeah. 255 is part of that 67 corridor, so it's almost like Godfrey up to, well, actually further north into the Quad Cities.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How would you pay for a transportation program? Because we're coming to the end of the bond issue that from 5 years ago or 6, whatever it was.
Yeah, I think you can bond. I think you can borrow when it's an infrastructure investment.
But how would you pay for it?
That's a great question. I don't know right now, to be very honest.
What
There's
about-
a lot of things we're currently not funding well in the state of Illinois, so it's hard to, there's a lot of discussion about adding adding more sales tax onto gas. I am not a proponent of that. I think we're adding to an outdated and old system. There's a lot of cars going away from gas, whether they're more fuel efficient or hybrid or electric. I think that people who use the roads should pay for the roads, and I think that that's the fairest way. So we have to make sure that that everyone who's on the road is contributing to that service. And when you're, for example, my district is a border district, so people can pop over to Missouri and get gas for 20 cents cheaper, and they often do, which pulls not only that 19 or 21 cents a gallon away, but it also pulls the sales tax away. I filed a bill when I first came into office that said, let's take that motor fuel tax amount off of fuel that is directly fueling boats on the river. And somebody blasted me saying I'm trying to protect yachters. Well, the reality is boaters are going to the Missouri side to get fuel because they have to pay 19 or 21 cents on the gallon to buy fuel on this side. It makes sense for us to lower that. We'd be receiving that sales tax, but we wouldn't be receiving the motor fuel tax. It makes sense. So we have to look at all those things that are.
So what issues did you work with the Congressman, LaHood and Shimkus, that kind of shaped your vision or kind of continued as an issue for you in the 100?
You know, I had the opportunity to work on a lot of different things. A lot of what I did was constituent service, so I'm very constituent oriented. Researching laws that we're going through. I had the opportunity to work with a number of departments to get information on why things work the way they do or why they don't work the way they should. So a lot of it was not necessarily the big bills that we're going through at the time, but it was a lot of things that people were interested in. Because of that, I still, I answer my own phones in my office, and I think people are surprised that I do that. But, that's a big part of constituent service.
What about the waterways, the federal waterways legislation? What kind of an impact would that have in your district?
It would have a huge impact in my district, and I've talked to Rodney Davis a good amount about it. I think that just visiting, for instance, LaGrange Lock and Dam, you look at it and the concrete is falling apart. I mean, it's a mess. We need to do something to upgrade our river transportation system. And at the same time, we need to make sure that the EPA isn't coming down and taking over farmland and clean water and things like that. I think that there's, yes, yeah, exactly.
By the way, the bill you mentioned, the one to do with the gas tax for voters.
Yeah.
What happened to that bill?
It did not go anywhere. Yeah.
Are you into committee or anything?
No. Nope.
Is that something you would try again?
I think I would eventually try it again. Yeah. As long as people understand that I'm not trying to protect. It actually is a revenue generator by decreasing that motor fuel tax. I think it's something that has to be explained a little bit better than it was in that certain media outlet.
You voted in favor of concealed carry.
I did,
right?
yeah.
How do you think that's going now? Do you have any concerns? Are you happy with how things are unfolding with that?
I think I've always had concerns about the cost. I understand going into it that there's a certain cost involved to setting it up and being able to do all the checks and things that need to be done. But we talk about rights and things, and I don't see it any different than the argument for an ID to go vote. I mean, if you give everybody a free ID to go vote, what's wrong with an ID? The whole argument against that was, well, an ID costs money. Well, the same thing for a concealed carry permit. Your right to your Second Amendment right is being infringed by that cost. So I think that it's high. I think it should be lowered. And I'm sure there's a number of other changes that probably will be proposed over the next year or so. I was happy to see that we didn't do anything major over the last year. We actually let it do what it was going to do, and so we could see what changes may or may not need to be made.
Now that you've had a fair amount of time to watch how that has gone, people have been telling me all year, we're waiting,
Yeah.
don't mess with it. Given that you've had time now, would you mess with it, not cost-wise, but other restrictions-wise? What would you want to see that bill look like?
There were I had a lot of constituents that said we shouldn't even have to get a permit. We shouldn't have to do anything. I'm a reasonable person. I think that I don't think that anybody should have any fear of a background check. I think that those things are good. I'd have to look back at the bill to make sure to see where changes need to be made. I know that the other side's going to fight it back, and we're going to fight it the other way. But I think that anybody willing to go through the process is going to be a fairly reasonable person.
So something like, right now, you can't sit in a public park with your gun.
Yeah.
You can't ride the bus with your gun.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, are those things you would want to roll back?
Yeah, I would think so. I don't think that somebody who doesn't own a car who chooses to take public transportation should be limited by that.
I'm looking, I'm wondering, where were you on medical marijuana?
It was a no.
It was a no.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
So we've seen on a number of different bills that, over the years, it's like taking a bite of the cookie. You take a bite, you take a bite, you take a bite, and eventually the whole cookie's gone. I think that medical marijuana is a step towards legalizing marijuana. And I don't know that that's necessarily a good thing. Yes, of sorts. I also have concerns about the way that different diseases and conditions may be added. It doesn't have to go back through the legislative process. It can be added by the department. So, they had it very limited in the bill, but once it's passed, they can add things in as they feel necessary.
So you have concerns about marijuana?
Yes.
What are your concerns about it? Why shouldn't it be legal, I guess?
Talking to police and law enforcement, a major concern is it's very hard to tell if somebody's driving under the influence without doing some type of direct blood test or something of that sort. It stays in your system longer than say alcohol or any other drug, so it's hard to determine whether an individual was doing it in the car or whether they did it 5 days ago. So the concern with driving under the influence is a big concern.
That's a concern for you, or is that a concern for police?
It's a concern for me as well as police. I think it's also a concern for me that it's still federally illegal. I think that the Food and Drug Administration should be taking these steps and not the State General Assembly. So.
Gambling, some on again, off again proposition. I think the latest proposals that Rita is working on do not provide any earmarks for ag programs, like previous iterations.
Yeah.
A, do you support an expansion of gambling, and B, could you support it if there's no ag component in it?
Yeah, I think the ag component's a very important piece of it. I will say a major concern of mine is the setup of a Chicago casino. I have major concerns on why they wouldn't have to work underneath the system that is currently in place, why we'd have to create a different system for them to operate under. So I haven't seen any recent changes to that bill, but that's one of my major concerns with prior bills.
And it's been a couple of years now since JDC closed. In retrospect, and having looked at the process over that time, are you satisfied with the way the state goes about closing facilities and repurposing the property?
Not at all. Not at all. You know, when CMS came in and said, and this was before I was a state representative, I was on the city council, they came in and they said, well, basically, do you want us to board up the windows now or do you want us to board them up later? And that is not the way a facility should be shut down. If you're going to make a change, if you're going to put your assets elsewhere, I think that you need to have a plan for every piece that the state owns. So we've been working on a bill for a while to create tax credits to put old state property back into use. So whether it's your local school district that wants to build a school on that property, they can use those tax credits to sell, or an individual business can come in and use those tax credits to offset their taxes. So I think it was a good way to take state property that is not being maintained off the books and possibly put it into tax production. So if a private business comes in and invests, that would be good for the state and the location where the state property is. You know, Jacksonville is a little bit different because JDC is right in the center of town. The grass is taken care of, and besides that, not a whole lot else.
Is this a bill that you would think could run during the veto session or more likely next spring?
I'd love to see it in the veto session. It's taken a number of different turns. It started out including all state property, and then it was narrowed down, and they were talking about taking this out, adding this back in, and things of that sort. So there's still a lot of moving parts. So I really, to be honest, am not certain.
Do you know the bill number off the top of your head?
I don't.
Are you responding on that?
Yes.
Okay. Same-sex marriage, you voted?
I voted no.
No, okay.
Yep.
Okay, just thought that as well.
Yeah. My major concerns with that bill are protections of religious freedom. I would not be a proponent of a business saying, no, I will not serve you because you are homosexual. But I think that it is well within a business or an individual's right to say, my beliefs do not allow me to participate in the act of homosexual marriage. And that was a major concern for me.
And on matters of abortion, reproductive rights.
Yeah, I'm pro-life.
Pro-life.
Yes.
In all cases, any exceptions?
I have a very difficult time discussing rape and incest. So, you know, it's a tough issue. It's obviously one of those issues that's not always black and white. But I consider myself pro-life. Yep.
And you're supporting, for governor, the GOP nominee.
We've seen that the state is not going in the right direction. You know, we keep swirling down the toilet bowl, and I think somebody needs to stop flushing. And I think that's what we need right now. We need a change.
So if the Republican candidate were to win the election in November for governor,
Yes.
how would you imagine the process down the street would change for you? What would you see different?
You know, I think I'll be very honest. I think it'll be more difficult for us. I told you we've served in a super minority with a Democrat governor and a Democrat General Assembly, and for Republicans, we'll have a seat at the table, which also means that we'll have more responsibility for the outcome. So we'll have to make tough decisions as well. But I think that, you know, I think that when there's more shared sacrifice, meaning Republicans and Democrats are at the table, I think more good gets accomplished. There's more compromise, there's more negotiations between both sides, and less bills that are purely for political attack ads, and more for policy and the betterment of the state of Illinois.
Have you read through Mr. Honor's blueprints that he's put out? Have you done any parsing of those? Anything that you're concerned about that doesn't seem to make sense to you?
You know, there's so much misinformation and stuff being thrown around. It's tough to sift through it all to make sure you know exactly what you're getting. I mean, the same way on the other side of the aisle too. So,
Well, he's put out his blueprints. I mean,
yeah,
that's-
and so I have not.
Alright. And I saw that you just went through the Edgar Fellows.
Yes,
program.
yeah.
How was that?
It was
What did you learn?
it was a great opportunity. You know, it was great to walk into a room and have Governor Edgar say, "All right, turn off Twitter, text, Facebook. You know, we're closed session. We're open minds. We're talking about issues." It was amazing to have some of those conversations and not be looking for somebody to stab you in the back. And that's what this state needs right now. This state needs those open conversations. It needs people willing to actually discuss things. And a lot of times it wasn't necessarily, you know, the sessions really got the wheels turning and the discussion started, but it was being at dinner with people afterwards and hanging out the night of to actually continue those discussions that really, and that's what we're missing. 20 years ago here, they had the same thing. They'd argue on the floor of the House, but they'd go somewhere else and they'd be, you know, Republicans and Democrats in the same place. And that's what we're missing. We don't get together that way.
I think we have hit all the same points that we hit with your opponent. Is there anything else you'd like to say that we didn't touch on? Any other points you'd like to make? Close it out?
You know, I think that if there's any question on why I'm here, I'm not here because, like I said, I'm not here because I want the spotlight. It's not because I think that I'm the most important person in the world. It's because I actually care. My point that I'd like to make is I was a good person before I came in. I'm a good person today, and I'll be a good person when I leave. So.